They say one fateful moment can unravel a lifetime of work. Little did anyone at JFK International Airport's exclusive first-class lounge suspect that this day would change the destinies of everyone involved. It began with a simple request for a seat, a spot, in the most prestigious corner of the lounge. Yet when a successful black CEO was humiliated and forced to relinquish his rightful VIP place to a white passenger, the dominoes started toppling in a way no one could have predicted. Revenge, redemption, and ripples of consequence followed, culminating in an outcome that rocked the entire airline industry. Kevin Winston stepped out of his limousine with a quiet sense of accomplishment that afternoon. He had just wrapped a triumphant series of business meetings in New York City and was en route back to Los Angeles. Though tired, he carried himself with the measured calm of a CEO who had seen victory after victory in the corporate arena. There was a gentle spring breeze brushing across his designer suit, the faint hum of jet engines overhead, and a swirl of conversations in multiple languages from travelers scurrying about John F. Kennedy International Airport. Kevin glanced up at the towering signage, pointing the way to terminals and lounges. He inhaled deeply, as if reminding himself to stay grounded. The day had been rewarding. He had managed to secure substantial investments for his expanding tech conglomerate, Winston Innovations. After years of consistent growth, Winston Innovations had become a formidable force in the technology sector, forging partnerships with major brands, including Microsoft, Google, and even forging an ongoing dialogue with Tesla. But behind every success was a labyrinth of personal sacrifice. Kevin's father, who had been a steel worker in Detroit, often reminded him of the importance of humility and respect, no matter how high you climbed. As he made his way through the airport, Kevin remembered a time when simply walking into an airport lounge seemed like an unattainable dream. He recalled traveling in economy class as a young graduate student, lugging around a scruffy laptop bag and occasionally missing flights due to lack of funds. His mother had scrimped and saved to get him to school, and Kevin's heart always warmed remembering her unwavering support. Standing now in front of the glass doors leading to Delta's exclusive first-class lounge at JFK, he couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. The lounge attendant, a middle-aged woman named Marjorie, greeted him with a courteous nod. "Good afternoon, sir," she said professionally. "May I see your ticket and identification?" Kevin handed over his first-class boarding pass for Delta Flight 1478, bound for Los Angeles. Along with the ID, his seat number was 1A, one of the VIP positions he had earned, not just with money, but with an unrelenting work ethic and the unstoppable force of his vision. Marjorie gave him a brief but polite smile, scanning through the flight details on her screen. "Thank you, Mr. Winston," she said, stepping aside to allow him entry. "Enjoy your time in the lounge, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable." Kevin stepped inside the lounge, a glass and chrome oasis amid the hustle of a busy international airport. Plush armchairs were arranged to allow both privacy and a sense of exclusivity. Multiple stations offered gourmet snacks, fresh fruit, and a variety of beverages. A curved window overlooked the tarmac, providing a breathtaking view of planes taxiing in the distance. Choosing a comfortable seat near the panoramic windows, Kevin settled in, checking emails on his phone. The hush in the lounge was a refreshing change from the frantic gate areas outside. Other first-class travelers lounged in designer outfits, sipping cocktails or flipping through magazines. Kevin got the sense of quiet camaraderie among those who had, in one way or another, reached the top rung of their personal or professional journeys. Time passed peacefully, and Kevin was nearly lost in his spreadsheets when a slight commotion near the lounge entrance drew his attention. A tall, broad-shouldered white man in a crisp navy blue suit appeared to be arguing with a staff member. The man's voice was controlled, but tinged with irritation as he gestured at his watch. Kevin couldn't quite make out the words, but it seemed the man was upset about seating arrangements. Moments later, Marjorie approached Kevin's seat with a polite, albeit tense expression. Beside her was the same tall man, who eyed Kevin with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Marjorie cleared her throat, leaning in slightly. "Mr. Winston," she began hesitantly, "I'm afraid we have a bit of a situation." Kevin raised an eyebrow, setting down his phone. "Yes," Marjorie tried to compose herself. "This gentleman is an important Delta partner, and unfortunately, we're at capacity for certain VIP seats in our lounge. The seat you're in is, well, we typically reserve it for special requests. Would you be so kind as to move to another seat? We'll ensure you're comfortable elsewhere." Kevin felt his heart flutter with disbelief. He had booked a first-class ticket and, through his membership status, was entitled to the VIP seat as well. Nevertheless, Kevin was a man who prided himself on calm negotiation. "I wasn't aware there was a seat specifically reserved. Is there a particular reason for this request?" he asked calmly. Marjorie's eyes flicked toward the tall man, who wore a smug half-smile. "This is Mr. Jameson Pratt," she said, voice lowering as though the mere mention of his name was supposed to carry weight. "He has a special arrangement with the airline. We're sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Winston. Please come with me and I'll set you up with a table in our conference nook." Kevin looked from Marjorie to Jameson Pratt. Pratt stared back, his demeanor that of someone entirely accustomed to getting what he wanted. Though Kevin's instincts told him to stand his ground, he had no desire to cause an open confrontation in the middle of the lounge. Taking a deep breath, Kevin rose. "Fine," he said. "I'll move." While Kevin collected his belongings, Pratt swiftly took the seat Kevin had vacated. He offered a thin-lipped smile, as if to say, "That's right, know your place." The silent exchange was not lost on several onlookers who watched with curiosity. This kind of power play rarely happened publicly. In a typical scenario, lounge staff discreetly managed seats. This was uncharacteristic. Marjorie led Kevin to another section of the lounge. It was still comfortable, but nowhere near the prime spot he'd rightfully earned. She left him with a perfunctory apology, then went about her business, clearly relieved the situation hadn't escalated into a spectacle. Kevin tried to shrug it off. He told himself a seat was a seat, and he'd be boarding soon. Why make a big deal? But the pang of humiliation lingered. Kevin had experienced bigotry before glances, assumptions, double takes. He knew that something about this situation wasn't a mere logistical miscue. There was a certain undertone in Pratt's arrogance, the subtle shift in the staff's demeanor. It was as if Kevin, a black man, couldn't possibly be as important as Pratt, a white man. He poured himself a cup of tea, hoping the warm liquid might soothe the churning in his stomach. He reminded himself that he was Kevin Winston, CEO of Winston Innovations, worth tens of millions of dollars, a significant stakeholder in multiple tech startups, a man who had no reason to take insults from anyone. Despite that, sometimes it seemed that some corners of the world refused to acknowledge a man of color's rightful place at the table, or in this case, the VIP seat. Just then, one of the lounge managers, a younger man named Anthony, approached. "Is everything all right, Mr. Winston? I noticed they moved you." Kevin studied Anthony's face. He saw genuine concern, but also a flicker of fear. "I'm fine," Kevin said, with a measured half-smile. "I was asked to give up my seat to someone with an arrangement. Didn't know Delta had special arrangements that trump frequent flyer status, but I guess I learn something new every day." Anthony frowned. "I'm really sorry. I know your membership. You're a top-tier flyer. There's no policy that requires you to move. I suspect Marjorie maybe she got pressured by Mr. Pratt. He's got connections." Kevin nodded, letting the manager's words sink in. "Thanks for checking in," he said, quietly turning back to his tea. "But As Anthony walked away, Kevin felt a roiling tension in his chest. He decided not to dwell on it. He had a flight to board, a business empire to run, and a life that was good. He couldn't let a rude passenger and an overly solicitous attendant disrupt his day. Nevertheless, the seed of the injustice had been planted. He would soon learn that seeds of injustice, once sown, rarely remain buried. Boarding began for first-class passengers, and Kevin stepped onto the plane with his carry-on. The flight attendants at the door offered their practice smiles, though Kevin picked up faint signs of recognition in one attendant's eyes. Perhaps she had seen the earlier lounge scene. He settled into 1A, the premium seat he had paid handsomely for. Yet the slight tension from earlier clung to him like an unshakable shadow. Moments later, who should appear in the aisle but Mr. Jameson Pratt? He offered Kevin a perfunctory glance, then slid into 1B, right next to him. Pratt exuded a sense of entitlement, placing his briefcase in the overhead bin with the sort of casual carelessness that threatened to encroach on Kevin's personal space. As Pratt sat, he gave Kevin a disingenuous nod, then turned his attention to fiddling with his watch or phone, ignoring him. The flight attendants bustled about, taking drink orders. Kevin considered burying himself in some reading a new contract from Winston Innovations needed fine-tuning. But a prickly restlessness seized him, as though the humiliating lounge incident still demanded resolution. Looking around, Kevin observed the other first-class passengers relaxing into their seats. It was business as usual for everyone else. When the flight attendants began to close the overhead bins, Pratt suddenly flagged one down, a woman named Allison. "Excuse me," Pratt said, his tone exasperated. "Why is it so cramped in here? I specifically requested additional overhead space. And is it possible to get the seat next to me cleared? I need extra room to rest." Allison blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, sir, but the flight is fully booked. We can't clear the seat next to you. That's for Mr. Winston." Pratt's eyes flicked toward Kevin in a scornful manner. "I understand that, but I was told I'd have more space. Is there no arrangement that can be made?" Allison maintained a practiced smile, though tension was evident in her posture. "I am afraid not, sir. Each seat is assigned to a passenger, and Mr. Winston has every right to his seat. Would you like me to hang your coat or store any items for you?" Pratt waved her off, and Allison moved on. Kevin couldn't help but feel a bit vindicated. At least here, on the plane, the staff recognized the seat as his and wouldn't just shuffle him around. Yet he also felt a tingle of worry. Pratt seemed the type who refused to let things go. The flight hadn't even taken off, and Pratt was already grumbling about arrangements. Once the plane taxied and took off into the clear afternoon sky, Kevin tried to relax. He scrolled through his phone, glancing at emails, and pondered how to approach his upcoming projects in La. Meanwhile, Pratt called over another flight attendant, complaining that the champagne wasn't chilled enough, that the cabin lighting was too bright, and that the seats were not as comfortable as he'd hoped. His voice, though muffled by the hum of jet engines, carried a sharp edge that set Kevin's teeth on edge. Eventually, Pratt struck up a conversation with the flight attendant, tipping his head in Kevin's direction. "This seatmate is interesting, but you'd think a frequent flyer would know how to stow his bag more efficiently. It's taking up half my space overhead." Kevin's ears perked up, a wave of annoyance coursing through him. He knew exactly where his bag was stowed well within his own overhead compartment allotment. He bit the inside of his cheek, forcing himself not to retort. But Pratt was testing his patience. Another flight attendant, Amelia, shot Kevin an apologetic glance, as though silently acknowledging the awkwardness. What began as small barbs escalated. Pratt snapped his fingers for service multiple times, eventually complaining that certain people were not giving him the respect due his status. Kevin, trying to keep calm, closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He had no interest in fueling a confrontation in the confined space of an airplane. However, tensions peaked midway through the flight. Pratt removed his suit jacket, then carelessly tossed it across the seats, where it landed partially on Kevin's lap. Kevin gently lifted the jacket by 2 fingers and placed it on Pratt's armrest. "Please keep your belongings to yourself," Kevin said, trying to maintain a neutral tone. Pratt eyed Kevin like an uninvited guest at a private club. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't touch my jacket," he said tersely, though he had clearly flung it in Kevin's direction. Kevin exhaled slowly. "If you don't want me touching your jacket, kindly don't throw it on me," he replied in an even voice. Pratt's lips twitched with thinly veiled disdain. "We all know how this lounge fiasco started. There's a system here. Some of us have special privileges." There it was a direct reference to the humiliating lounge incident. Kevin felt a simmering heat in his chest. He answered quietly, "I'm aware of how that fiasco started. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." The rest of the flight unraveled in a swirl of passive-aggressive tension. Pratt complained about the meal. He insisted the seat was faulty, prompting the flight attendants to reset his recline multiple times. He even demanded to speak to the pilot at one point. Through all this, Kevin kept his composure, though he sensed that each staff member who tried to appease Pratt grew more frustrated with every passing minute. Eventually, the plane touched down in Los Angeles. Kevin couldn't have been more relieved to stand, stretch, and collect his luggage from the overhead bin. As he stepped into the aisle, Pratt made one final remark. "Next time, I'll be sure to fly private. This airline standards have dropped, letting just anyone in first class." Kevin shot him a withering look. Yet the jab wasn't just about Kevin. It was a general statement, possibly about race, possibly about class. Kevin wondered how Pratt had survived in modern corporate circles if he wore his prejudices so openly. The tension-laden flight ended in a mass shuffle of passengers disembarking. Kevin nodded respectfully to the flight attendants as he stepped off the plane, grateful to be free of Pratt's oppressive arrogance. Little did he know that the worst was yet to come, and it would happen in a place supposedly dedicated to comfort and luxury, the Ritz-Carlton at Marina del Rey, where Kevin often stayed during his frequent visits. Evening settled over Los Angeles with its customary flare orange skies melting into purples, city lights blossoming across the skyline. Kevin's black Mercedes, arranged by his personal assistant, whisked him from LAX to the Ritz-Carlton in Marina del Rey. The familiar sight of the Grand Hotel never failed to soothe him. Polished marble floors, impeccable service, and a well-trained staff usually greeted Kevin with the respect and privacy he needed after a grueling flight. At the reception desk, a well-groomed concierge, Christine, smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Mr. Winston," she said, typing on the computer. "We have your usual suite ready. How was your trip?" Kevin allowed himself a small grin. "Eventful, to say the least, but I'm glad to be here." Christine passed him 2 keycards. "Of course. We hope your stay is pleasant. If you need anything, let us know." Kevin thanked her, then strode toward the elevator bank, baggage in tow. The plush carpeting hushed his footsteps, and the gentle ambience of the lobby offered a much-needed respite from the day's tensions. He pressed the elevator button and waited. As the doors opened, his sense of calm was shattered by an unfortunately recognizable voice echoing across the lobby. "I'm telling you, this is unacceptable," boomed Jameson Pratt. Kevin blinked, disbelief flooding him. What was Pratt doing here at the Ritz-Carlton? This had to be a coincidence. Surely the man had no reason to follow him. Instinct told Kevin to ignore the commotion, head to his suite, and let Pratt's meltdown be someone else's concern. But curiosity tugged at him, and he turned slightly to observe. Pratt stood at the reception desk, leaning over the counter as he berated the night manager. "I'm supposed to have the Marina View suite, but you gave me a room facing the parking lot. Do you know who I am? I don't care if the suite is booked. You had a reservation from me from Delta's corporate partnership, arranged a month ago." The night manager, a composed older gentleman, tried to placate Pratt. "Sir, we understand your frustration. The Marina View suite is currently occupied. We can arrange for another suite with a partial Marina View, or we can upgrade you tomorrow if you're staying multiple nights." Pratt cut him off. "It's not about tomorrow, it's about now. I want what I requested. I'm calling your general manager, and I'll have heads rolling if this isn't fixed." Kevin felt a wave of second-hand embarrassment. Pratt was making quite a scene. On the other hand, Kevin had grown accustomed to the warm, quiet courtesy of the Ritz-Carlton staff. He hated seeing them spoken to in this manner. Just as Kevin considered stepping away, Pratt turned his head and spotted him. Their eyes locked for a moment, Pratt's expression morphing from anger to a twisted smirk. "Oh, look who's here," Pratt crowed. "The man who took my lounge seat and half my overhead compartment." Kevin could hardly believe the narrative Pratt was spinning. Rather than engaging, Kevin shook his head and stepped into the elevator. He pressed the button for his floor and willed the doors to close quickly. But Pratt, apparently not finished, hurried forward. At the last second, Pratt slid between the closing doors, blocking them with his arm. "Hold the elevator," Pratt said in a tone that wasn't a request. The doors opened again, and he stepped inside, standing far too close for comfort. "I see you're staying here too. Funny how our paths keep crossing." Kevin forced a tight smile. "Small world, I guess." Pratt studied him with narrowed eyes. "What brings you to La?" Kevin debated whether to reveal anything, but he saw no point in lying about basic facts. "I have business. Meetings. Business, huh?" Pratt repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. "I'm in the middle of some important negotiations myself. Delta partnership expansions, corporate acquisitions. Maybe you've heard of Pratt Industries?" Kevin hadn't, but he merely offered a non-committal nod. "I see." The elevator reached Kevin's floor with a soft chime. As he stepped out, Pratt remained inside, his finger on a different floor button. Before the door slid shut, Pratt smirked one last time. "Enjoy your stay while it lasts." Kevin walked down the corridor toward his suite, unsettled by the brief exchange. Clearly, Pratt was a man who thrived on intimidation and browbeating others to get his way. But this intersection of coincidences, same airline lounge fiasco, same first-class flight, then the same hotel, felt too improbable for Kevin's comfort. He had no evidence of any wrongdoing or deliberate stalking, but something gnawed at him. Perhaps Pratt had arranged to stay at the Ritz-Carlton precisely because Kevin had mentioned it in passing at some corporate function. The wealthy world could be surprisingly small, especially among high-end travelers. Once inside his suite, Kevin locked the door behind him. With relief, he sank onto the couch, gazing through the window at the sparkling marina. He resolved not to let Pratt spoil his evening. He had a dinner meeting planned with a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, an opportunity that could lead to another round of funding for Winston Innovations' upcoming robotics division. The dinner meeting proceeded smoothly at a refined seafood restaurant overlooking the marina. Kevin found temporary solace in discussing futuristic tech and potential collaborations. For a few hours, he forgot the humiliations of the day. When he returned to the Ritz-Carlton, he approached the concierge to confirm a conference room booking for the next day. Christine brightened upon seeing him. "Mr. Winston, good evening. Did you have a nice dinner?" "I did, thank you." "Could you confirm my reservation for the private conference room tomorrow at 10 a.m? Christine typed briskly. "Absolutely." Suddenly, Christine glanced behind Kevin and her face fell. Kevin turned and saw Pratt approaching. "We meet again," Pratt drawled. "Working late, are we?" Kevin turned back, ignoring him, focusing on Christine. Everything okay, Christine?" She cleared her throat and lowered her voice. "Of course, Mr. Winston. The conference room is all set for you." Pratt sidled up to the counter, somehow turning an ordinary action into a display of arrogance. "What's the name under that booking?" he said to Christine. "I might need to schedule an overlapping meeting." Christine's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, that conference room is reserved for Mr. Winston." Pratt shot Kevin a sideways glance. "I'm sure we can arrange something. The Ritz-Carlton is known for accommodating special requests. Or so I thought." Kevin mustered all the politeness he could. "Mr. Pratt, I need the entire room for my meeting. I'd appreciate if you respect my reservation. I'm sure the hotel can arrange another space for you." Pratt shrugged, a thin smile on his lips. "Sure, I won't intrude for now." He nodded at Christine. "But I expect an equally suitable alternative. Remember what I said about heads rolling if I don't get what I need?" Christine frowned, her nerves evident. "We'll do our best, sir." Pratt clapped Kevin on the shoulder in an overly familiar gesture. "Enjoy your night, Winston." Kevin recoiled at the touch, but before he could object, Pratt walked off, whistling under his breath as if without a care in the world. After Pratt's departure, Christine apologized profusely. Kevin waved it off. "Not your fault," he said. "Don't worry about him. I'll see you tomorrow morning." But as Kevin headed to his suite, he couldn't shake the feeling that Pratt was testing boundaries, injecting himself into Kevin's path at every turn. Whether Pratt was simply on a power trip or had a deeper motive, Kevin didn't know. All he wanted was for this bizarre saga to end so he could focus on his business. He had no idea that the next day would bring an unexpected confrontation that would eclipse all previous humiliations and ultimately lead to a moment of karmic retribution more potent than either man could have imagined. Kevin Winston woke early the next morning, stirring before sunrise with a blend of anticipation and lingering apprehension. He knew that today's presentation could be a turning point for his company, Winston Innovations, especially the nascent robotics division he had championed from the ground up. While he was confident in his vision and proud of the prototypes he and his team had spent months perfecting, he couldn't entirely shake off the tension from his recent encounters with Jameson Pratt. From the humiliating fiasco at JFK's first-class lounge to Pratt's incessant attempts at intimidation, Kevin feared a new confrontation might be lurking just beyond the horizon. By 7:00 a.m., Kevin was showered, dressed, and reviewing his notes in the Ritz-Carlton's penthouse suite. His laptop was open to a slideshow that outlined Winston Innovations' upcoming breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, advanced factory automation, and AI-driven service robots. A glance at the clock on the nightstand reminded him he had plenty of time before his 10:00 a.m. meeting in the hotel's mezzanine conference room. Yet he felt an urgency to arrive well in advance, wanting every detail to be perfect. Shortly after 8:00 a.m., Kevin rode the elevator down to the mezzanine level. The corridor leading to the reserved room was lined with minimalist artwork abstract pieces in soothing shades of blue and grey. He found the door marked Monterey Room already propped open by hotel staff, who were busily laying out pastries, fresh fruit, pitchers of infused water, and coffee. 2 staff members greeted him with respectful nods as he entered, and he couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude for their professionalism. The room itself was an elegant, sunlit space with high ceilings and immaculate carpeting. A large mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by plush leather chairs. In one corner stood a table of refreshments. In another, a discreet array of audio-visual equipment, including a projector and a small control panel to adjust lighting and sound levels. Kevin spent a careful half-hour testing everything, displaying slides on the screen, checking for clarity, verifying the microphone worked properly. The staff offered assistance, but Kevin was comfortable handling the technical details himself. By 9:00 a.m., Kevin had rearranged the seating positions so that attendees would be able to see the screen from any angle. He also placed handouts at every seat, glossy brochures highlighting Winston Innovations' existing products, along with a separate folder explaining the new robotics vision. Anyone who reviewed these documents would get a sense of the meticulous research, user-focused design, and potential market impact behind the project. Around 9:30 a.m., the first of Kevin's colleagues began to arrive. Each one was dressed in business casual attire, though they carried themselves like seasoned professionals. Some were individuals who had already poured substantial funds into Winston Innovations ventures. Others were potential partners, curious about whether Kevin's robotics ideas might fit into their own strategic goals. A handful were Kevin's own technical leads, engineers who wore quiet confidence on their faces, excited to watch Kevin publicly unveil prototypes they had worked on for countless late nights. "Morning, Kevin," greeted Charles, a silver-haired investor who had backed Kevin since the early days. He set down his slim briefcase and shook Kevin's hand warmly. "Everything looks fantastic in here. You ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Kevin replied, forcing a small laugh to mask the undercurrent of nerves. He glanced around, checking the final details. "Help yourself to the refreshments. I'll start right at 10. By 9:45 a.m., the room hummed with low conversation as more attendees filtered in. They introduced themselves, exchanged business cards, and took seats around the table. A few recognized each other from prior technology conferences and began discussing market trends, new AI software, or the potential synergy of Kevin's robotics with existing supply chain solutions. The atmosphere was collegial, marked by an undercurrent of excitement for what Winston Innovations would reveal. Exactly at 10:00 a.m., Kevin stood at the head of the table. The room fell silent. In his mind, he envisioned his mother and father, both long accustomed to the sacrifices their son had made, hoping he would make them proud. With a final tap on his laptop, Kevin launched into his presentation. A crisp slide flickered onto the screen behind him, showing the Winston Innovations logo above the words Robotics Division, the future of intelligent automation. Kevin began by outlining his fundamental belief that robotic systems powered by cutting-edge AI could improve not just industrial productivity, but also everyday life. He showed images of sleek robotic arms, assembling electronics with precision, of advanced prototypes that could assist people in need of mobility support, and of small, autonomous robots that could handle mundane, repetitive household tasks. The audience leaned forward, riveted. This was more than just hype. The slides demonstrated real prototypes in carefully documented testing environments. About half an hour into the talk, the group seemed wholly absorbed. Kevin fielded questions ranging from the ethics of deploying AI-driven robotics to the likely return on investment for early adopters. He was in his element, clarifying the challenges of sensor integration, the complexities of machine learning algorithms, and the importance of rigorous safety measures. With every exchange, Kevin felt his confidence soar. This was exactly the kind of synergy he had hoped for. Suddenly, a thunderous crash from the corridor broke his flow. The door to the conference room flung open, and a hotel staff member stumbled in, looking mortified. Behind her, looming like a fury incarnate, stood Jameson Pratt, his expression twisted with indignation. Immediately, hush fell over the room. Some attendees recognized Pratt from business headlines. Others had never heard of him, but they recoiled at his aggressive demeanor. I tried to stop him," the flustered staffer whispered, nearly dropping her stack of notepads. "He insisted on coming in." Pratt shouldered past her without so much as an apology. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored grey suit, though his tie was yanked slightly loose, suggesting he'd been pacing or arguing moments earlier. His eyes swept across the assembled group, cold and intense. Then he pointed an accusatory finger at Kevin. "Just who do you think you are?" Pratt growled, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. "You prance in here, acting like you've cornered the market on big ideas, while I have urgent business with some of the highest executives in the airline industry. I need this room now." Murmurs rippled through the group, baffled by Pratt's rudeness and brazenness. Charles, seated near Kevin, frowned openly, flipping through his mental Rolodex to see where he'd heard the name Jameson Pratt before. Meanwhile, Kevin simply stared in disbelief. Part of him had suspected Pratt might try some form of retribution after the lounge incident, but this level of audacity still caught him off guard. Kevin inhaled a calming breath. He refused to raise his voice, though adrenaline spiked in his veins. "Mr. Pratt," he said, carefully setting down the wireless clicker he'd been using to advance slides, "I'm in the middle of a scheduled private meeting. If you need a conference room, you should speak with the hotel's management." Pratt snorted, a derisive sound that made some in the audience bristle. "This meeting can wait," he spat. "You have no idea of the scale of my business negotiations. I'm dealing with multi-million-dollar expansions for major airlines, Delta, Emirates, Lufthansa, you name it. My time is far too valuable to be wasted." His gaze swept contemptuously over the robotic prototypes displayed in Kevin's slides. "Whatever you're hawking here is of zero consequence compared to what I do." Exchanging glances with one another, Kevin's attendees seemed torn between alarm and indignation. One of them, a software engineer named Martina, discreetly reached for her phone, perhaps to record the confrontation. Charles finally stood, addressing Pratt in a measured tone. "Sir, who exactly are you, and why are you interrupting our private session?" Ignoring Charles entirely, Pratt kept his focus on Kevin. He strode farther into the room, the heels of his polished shoes making sharp clicks on the carpeted floor. "Listen, Winston. If you're as intelligent as you pretend to be, you'll wrap this up and clear out. I have airline executives flying in just for me, and I need the best space in this hotel. Forcing me to wait is unacceptable." A wave of tension crackled through Kevin, intensifying with every second. This was the final straw. He'd tolerated Pratt's arrogance in the lounge, on the plane, and at the hotel's front desk. Now Pratt was not only insulting him in front of potential investors, but also threatening to derail a crucial presentation that could shape the future of Winston Innovations. Summoning his composure, Kevin stepped away from the projector screen, ensuring his voice remained steady. "Enough. You're trespassing in a room I have legally reserved. Your intimidation tactics end here. If you want to negotiate with airlines, rent your own space or wait for the hotel to find you an alternative." Pratt's sneer deepened. "You really think you have any authority here? Let me remind you of how this fiasco started back at JFK on a first-class flight. In a lounge you were asked to vacate. Those arrangements are what keep me above the likes of you. People like me," he gestured to himself, then flicked his hand dismissively toward Kevin. "We get what we want because we've earned it. Or did you not learn your lesson when you were told to move seats for my convenience?" The racial undertone bristled across the room. Pratt didn't have to say it outright. The implication was clear enough to everyone, especially Kevin. A pall of shock settled over the table. Kevin's associates exchanged alarmed looks, some of them pushing back their chairs in case the situation became more volatile. Charles, who had known Kevin for years and recognized the subtle brand of bigotry at play, took a protective step forward, positioning himself nearer to Kevin. "Staff, please escort Mr. Pratt out." Kevin said evenly, not taking his eyes off the intruder. His voice wavered with anger but held firm. He refused to unleash a shouting match, someone as unhinged as Pratt would only revel in that. Instead, Kevin appealed to the rules of the hotel and the boundary that had been brazenly violated. The staffer in the doorway, still clutching the notepads, looked paralyzed. She glanced at Pratt's enraged face, then back at Kevin. Pratt took another step closer to Kevin, his posture rigid with arrogance. "You don't get it, do you? After what happened in that lounge, and on that plane, consider this a personal matter. I know your type. People might be impressed by your fancy slides and your innovation, but you'll never be on my level. I'm giving you one last chance to clear out before I have you banned from every major airline in the country." A hush fell over the room, thick with disbelief. One of Kevin's colleagues, a woman named Lena, raised her smartphone and began filming. She understood the power of documentation, especially if Pratt intended to follow through on threats that bordered on extortion. Sensing he was being recorded, Pratt spun on his heel to face her. "Stop filming me," he growled. She held her phone steady, refusing to back down. A few other attendees followed suit, capturing the scene in case it escalated into something more physical, or in case they needed proof later. Kevin felt a surge of conflicting impulses, an urge to protect his team, a burning desire to defend his own dignity, and an almost surreal sense of shock that a grown man could behave with such reckless entitlement. "I'll say this once," Kevin said, his voice quiet but resolute. "Leave this room or I'll have hotel security remove you." At that moment, the door swung open again, this time revealing the hotel's general manager, Sofia Martinez, accompanied by two uniformed security guards. Sofia wore a tailored charcoal suit, her demeanor calm, yet visibly displeased by the commotion. She took a swift measure of the situation, Kevin and his startled associates on one side, Pratt's seething form on the other, camera phones capturing every angle. "Mr. Pratt," Sofia began, her voice carrying a polished authority, "we have offered you an alternative conference room on a different floor. However, you refuse to accept our arrangements. This space is contractually reserved by Mr. Winston for the entire morning. I must ask you to leave these premises immediately. If you don't comply, our security team will escort you out." Pratt whipped around to face Sofia. He exuded the same arrogance he'd brandished all day. "Do you know who I am? I'll have you fired for this. I'll call the Ritz-Carlton's corporate office and have them breathing down your neck within the hour if you don't give me what I need." Sofia didn't flinch. "Sir, we respect all our guests, but your behavior here violates our policies and disrupts Mr. Winston's event. I understand you have business with airline executives, but we cannot allow you to barge into a booked room uninvited, nor threaten guests and staff. Please come with these guards, or they will remove you by force." One of the security guards, a broad-shouldered man with a calm expression, stepped forward, arms at his sides, but ready for action if needed. Pratt's face turned a deep shade of red as he realized the gravity of the standoff. He glared at Kevin with pure loathing. "You'll regret this," Pratt hissed. His voice trembled with either rage or the slow dawning of defeat, perhaps both. "And not just you," he added, casting a sweeping look at everyone else in the room. Each phone camera still aimed in his direction. "Every last person who crossed me will feel the consequences." With that final threat, Pratt slammed the door open so violently it nearly struck the hallway wall, then stormed out. The security guards followed, ensuring he left the mezzanine level entirely. Kevin stood silently for a few seconds, the adrenaline ebbing away to leave a dull ache in his chest. He could hear the hushed murmurs of his colleagues, some of them still in shock. Sofia Martinez offered an apologetic incline of her head. "Mr. Winston, on behalf of the Ritz-Carlton, the first sincerely apologize for this interruption. We take full responsibility for failing to stop Mr. Pratt at the door. If you need any assistance rescheduling or adding more time to your reservation, let us know. Kevin nodded appreciatively. Thank you, Miss Martinez. Let's proceed with a short break, and then we'll continue. As Sophia left to ensure Pratt wouldn't cause any more trouble, Kevin turned to the group, hands trembling slightly at his sides. I'm sorry you all had to witness that. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Charles, still standing near Kevin, cleared his throat. That wasn't your fault. If anything, I'm impressed you kept your cool as long as you did. Several people nodded in agreement, some offering words of support like, "We stand with you, Kevin," and no one should have to deal with that kind of treatment. Still, the atmosphere in the room was changed. An undercurrent of both unease and solidarity replaced the earlier enthusiasm. To help everyone recover from the shock, Kevin suggested a 15-minute recess. Some attendees stepped outside to phone loved ones, while others refreshed their coffee or discussed how best to handle the now viral phone footage. One or two even debated whether it was wise to share the confrontation on social media, especially if Pratt made good on his threats. Little did any of them realize that Pratt's outrageous meltdown was just the spark that would ignite a much larger blaze. For months, perhaps even years, Pratt had been abusing a so-called special arrangement with Delta, along with other airlines, bribing mid-level managers to secure first-class upgrades, exclusive lounge privileges, and the right to bump other travelers from seats. At the same time, Pratt was rumored to have engaged in shady practices, from misappropriating corporate funds to forging documents that inflated his personal importance. Now that he'd caused a spectacle at the Ritz-Carlton and done so in front of numerous witnesses, many of whom had captured it on video, he had inadvertently handed the evidence to the very people who would spark an internal airline investigation. By the time Kevin and his colleagues regrouped and resumed the presentation, phones throughout the room were buzzing with incoming messages. Word spread rapidly about Pratt's meltdown. A few staff members from the hotel, outraged on Kevin's behalf, reached out to their airline contacts to report Pratt's behavior. Within hours, high-level officials at Delta were alerted to the fiasco. Those same officials had already been quietly monitoring Pratt's suspected abuses. The disruptive incident at the Ritz-Carlton offered the final proof they needed to act decisively. Kevin, unaware of the brewing corporate storm, soldiered on with his presentation, focusing on the prototypes and investment strategies he had prepared. He found a second wind in the unwavering support of the people around him, each one more determined than ever to see Winston Innovations thrive. Ironically, Pratt's intrusion had only fortified Kevin's credibility. Many investors now saw how gracefully Kevin handled adversity, while Pratt's bullying tactics underlined Winston's integrity by contrast. When Kevin reached his final slide, the mood in the room was one of quiet triumph. The participants recognized that something significant had just occurred beyond the scope of robotics or AI. They'd witnessed the calm courage of a CEO who refused to be cowed by prejudice or intimidation. And though no one could have predicted it at the time, the humiliating spectacle Pratt created that morning would soon rebound on him, toppling the entire house of cards he'd built upon coercion and corruption. For now, however, Kevin allowed himself a tired smile as he thanked his attendees. While they packed up laptops and gathered business cards, Kevin's phone buzzed with messages from well-wishers, from stunned acquaintances who'd caught wind of Pratt's meltdown, and from close friends offering to help. Little did he know that outside the conference room, in the wider world of airline executives and corporate boards, a swift reckoning was already underway. Pratt's intimidation had reached its breaking point, one that would trigger revelations and consequences far beyond anything he had imagined. In just a few days, the repercussions would shake Delta's management, leading to multiple firings and a total severance of ties with Jameson Pratt. At the same time, Kevin Winston would find himself receiving calls from the very top of the airline industry, apologies, explanations, and promises of reform. But in that moment, as the door finally closed on the day's chaos, Kevin could only breathe a quiet sigh of relief that Pratt was gone. He had no idea how profound the fallout would be, or how quickly Pratt's carefully constructed facade would crumble beneath the weight of his own arrogance. Days later, Kevin stood on the balcony of his suite at the Ritz-Carlton, gazing out at the marina. His meetings had concluded successfully, resulting in a new partnership for Winston Innovations. He should have felt triumphant, yet the fiasco with Pratt cast a lingering shadow. He had done his best to put it aside, focusing on his own business. But sometimes life has a way of wrapping up loose ends. That afternoon, while Kevin was packing for his return to New York, his phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, Serena, who worked in Delta's corporate communications department. They had known each other since Kevin's earliest entrepreneurial days, and she sometimes kept him in the loop about airline-related happenings. "Serena, Kevin, you won't believe this. That Pratt guy you had issues with got exposed for bribery, harassment, and a bunch of other stuff. Delta just cut all ties with him and fired everyone who colluded with him internally. Word is they're going to make a public statement soon. Thought you'd want to know." Kevin stared at the message, letting it sink in. He had never intended to instigate a meltdown, but Pratt's vile behavior and unscrupulous dealings had finally caught up with him. A swirl of relief and disbelief coursed through Kevin. He typed back, "Kevin, I can't say I'm surprised. The man was out of control. Thanks for letting me know. Keep me posted if you hear anything else." Serena's next message came 10 minutes later. It was a link to an internal memo that Delta had just circulated. The memo confirmed Pratt's indefinite banning from the airline, plus the termination of several staff members who had facilitated unethical practices. The employees' names weren't listed in Serena's text, but Kevin recognized some job titles from the lounge fiasco. There was speculation that even the lounge attendant, Marjorie, had been let go, though some employees believed she had merely followed orders from someone higher up. The chain of command was being investigated. Delta's official stance was that they had zero tolerance for corruption, discrimination, or abuse of authority. Kevin raised an eyebrow at the mention of discrimination. Perhaps their internal review of passenger complaints and lounge security footage had revealed hints of Pratt's prejudiced conduct. Or maybe the staff's mishandling of Kevin's seat. In any case, the airline was clearly eager to distance itself from Pratt and all who supported him. Later that day, Kevin received a courteous phone call from Delta's Vice President of Customer Experience, personally apologizing for the incidents in the lounge and on the flight. The VP assured Kevin that the situation was being addressed thoroughly, promising significant policy changes to prevent any repeat of the fiasco. Kevin accepted the apology, though he remained politely distant. Over the years, he'd learned that corporations often apologized only after a scandal threatened their reputation. Still, he was gratified to see some accountability. The greatest shock, however, came when Kevin checked out of the Ritz-Carlton. As he settled his bill, the general manager, Sophia Martinez, approached him with a warm smile. "Mr. Winston, before you go, I want you to know we deeply regret any disturbance you faced during your stay. Mr. Pratt has been banned from all Ritz-Carlton properties worldwide. His behavior here was beyond unacceptable." Kevin blinked. He had not expected such a sweeping punishment. He thought perhaps Pratt would simply be watched more closely, but a lifetime ban was severe. "That's quite a decision," Kevin said quietly. "He must have made quite an impression." Sophia nodded gravely. "We take our brand standards very seriously. The way he harassed our staff, barged into your meeting, and threatened everyone, it was unprecedented." We protect our staff and guests from that sort of behavior. We've also decided to honor your entire stay and your conference room booking at no charge as a gesture of goodwill. Kevin was taken aback. Thank you, he said sincerely. I appreciate it, though you really didn't have to do that. Sophia smiled. You're an esteemed guest, and we value fairness above all. Besides, we hope you'll continue to trust us in the future. After settling the final details, Kevin left the Ritz-Carlton. As he eased into the backseat of his waiting car, he reflected on how swiftly the tides of fortune could turn. Pratt, so sure of his own invulnerability, had been hoisted by his own petard exposed for corruption, losing his standing at Delta and blacklisted from the Ritz-Carlton. When Kevin arrived at LAX, his boarding pass for the flight back to New York was flagged for special sex IP services. Word had spread among the staff, and they seemed eager to provide a better experience. Kevin was escorted to a private lounge area he hadn't even known existed. A senior lounge attendant greeted him with a respectful bow, ensuring Kevin he'd have the quiet, comfortable space he deserved. Kevin thanked them, but inside, he felt a profound sense of how fleeting power can be. Yesterday's tyrant can become today's outcast. One misstep, especially if fueled by prejudice and corruption, can undo a lifetime of illusions. Before boarding, Kevin took a moment to message his father. Hey Dad, you always taught me that respect is key. Learned again today that those who don't show it often fall. Love you. He attached a quick snapshot of the luxurious private lounge. His father, proud of his son's resilience, responded with a text that read, So proud of you, son. Stand tall. See you when you're home. Kevin boarded his flight back to New York with a new sense of closure. He knew that not all injustices in the world ended with swift karmic repercussions, but sometimes they did. And for that, he was grateful. And so, what began with a demand for a better seat ended with a swift downfall no one could have predicted. One man's arrogance and discrimination became the catalyst for a thorough reckoning within a powerful airline and beyond. Kevin Winston's quiet dignity triumphed over Jameson Pratt's toxic entitlement, proving that no matter how deep-rooted the privilege, integrity can still win in the end. If this story moved you or made you reflect on the importance of respect, fairness, and standing your ground, now is the time to spread that message. If you enjoyed this dramatic twist of corporate fates, please give this video a like, share it with friends who'd appreciate a tale of karmic justice, and subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories. Your support helps us bring you the stories that inspire, challenge, and keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for watching.